Liam Donovan stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the name tag on his chest. The bright lights in the retail store cast harsh shadows on his face, but it didn't matter. Today was the day he would see the truth. His reflections seemed like someone else. No longer the polished, successful real estate mogul, but a humble cashier dressed in a standard blue uniform. He took a deep breath. The suit and tie were gone. No more expensive watches, no more flashy designer clothes. All of it was buried beneath this unremarkable appearance, a disguise meant to mask his true identity. The weight of it all was suffocating. For years, Liam had surrounded himself with wealth, power, and influence. People knew him, admired him, and feared him. But now, as he scanned his surroundings in the bustling San Francisco retail store, he felt like just another cog in the machine. No one here would care who he was, but that was the point. He didn't want them to. His mind raced with thoughts of his best friend, Ethan Price, the man who'd stood by his side for over 20 years. Their friendship was once unshakable, built on trust and shared dreams. But lately something had shifted. Ethan's behavior had become increasingly erratic, distant, secretive, almost calculating. Liam had seen the signs, and his gut told him that something wasn't right. Liam had been watching Ethan for weeks now, trying to piece together the puzzle. But the more he observed, the more confusing it became. Was Ethan really betraying him, or was he simply under pressure? Was it business, personal issues, or something far worse? The only way to know for sure was to be closer, to hear it firsthand. His decision to work as a cashier wasn't impulsive. It was a calculated risk. Ethan came into the store occasionally, a regular customer, but Liam had never seen him act suspiciously. But today was different. Today, he would watch his best friend from a new angle, unnoticed. As Liam wiped his hands on the apron and moved toward his register, he spotted Ethan entering the store, glancing around as though he was looking for someone. His heart skipped a beat. Was this the moment? Would Ethan notice something off about him? Or worse, would Liam's presence trigger a reaction that confirmed his worst fears? Ethan's eyes swept over the aisles, not once making eye contact with Liam. The subtle shift in his demeanor sent a chill down Liam's spine. There was something in the air, something Liam couldn't quite put his finger on. It was the same unease he'd felt during their last few meetings, but this time it was different. More calculated, more distant. As Ethan approached the register, Liam forced a smile, trying to keep his voice steady. "How's it going, Ethan?" Ethan froze for a second, his expression flickering for the briefest moment. Then he offered a half smile, too quick to be genuine. "Hey, Liam, just picking up a few things." The exchange felt strange, too formal, too rehearsed. Liam noted the slight tension in Ethan's voice, something he couldn't have missed, even if he wasn't watching so closely. There was something more than just the business deals hanging in the air now. For a moment, their eyes locked, but the connection felt empty, like a page from a book that had been torn out and replaced. Nothing familiar, just a cold recognition that made Liam's skin crawl. He scanned Ethan's items. Nothing unusual, just the basics. But it was the small, subtle things that caught Liam's attention. The nervous glances, the way Ethan lingered near the exit as if he wanted to rush off but couldn't, the way his hands clenched around the shopping basket. Liam handed him the receipt, feeling his heartbeat quicken. Ethan took it without a word, his hand brushing Liam's for a fraction of a second. It was almost imperceptible, but to Liam it felt like a warning. As Ethan walked away, Liam's mind was racing. What was he really hiding? The doubt was overwhelming, gnawing at him, but there was no denying the unease in his gut. Something was wrong, and today was only the beginning. The quiet hum of the store seemed louder now, echoing in his ears. Liam exhaled slowly, his thoughts tangled in the confusion Ethan had left behind. Was this betrayal really the truth? And if it was, how far would he be willing to go to expose it? Liam had spent the entire morning replaying the brief encounter with Ethan in his mind. Every word, every glance, he could no longer shake the unsettling feeling that something was terribly wrong. The way Ethan hesitated when he saw him, how he seemed to avoid eye contact. Liam wasn't sure if he was just being paranoid, but deep down, He knew there was more to it than mere coincidence. Later that afternoon, as Liam continued his shift at the register, he couldn't help but notice Ethan's recurring visits. Ethan didn't seem to be buying anything in particular, just random purchases that didn't add up. Something about it felt off, as if he was deliberately keeping his shopping list vague. But the real clue came when Liam saw Ethan glance at him, not with the usual familiarity of an old friend, but with a flicker of something else, something guarded, almost calculating. Liam was no stranger to suspicion. He'd been in the business world long enough to know when someone was hiding something. But it wasn't just business he was questioning now. It was his own best friend. The final piece clicked when Ethan left the store after his last visit that day. He wasn't alone. A man, tall and well-dressed in a sharp suit, had joined him as they walked out together, talking in low, urgent tones. Liam couldn't hear their conversation, but he could see their body language. Ethan was leaning in close, nodding intently at whatever the man was saying. The man, unfamiliar to Liam, was clearly someone important to Ethan. His stature, his expensive clothing, it didn't seem like the kind of person someone would just run into by chance in a retail store. And the way Ethan kept his distance from him, as if trying not to be seen, sent a chill down Liam's spine. It was in that moment that the first seed of doubt truly took root. What if Ethan wasn't just acting distant because of stress or personal issues? What if this was something far more deliberate? Had Ethan been hiding something all along? Was he working with someone else to bring Liam down? Liam's mind raced as he watched the two men walk away, their conversation fading as they turned the corner. The feeling of betrayal gripped him tighter than ever. His best friend, the man he'd trusted above anyone else, was involved in something that went deeper than a simple misunderstanding. He quickly grabbed his phone and texted Mia, his trusted colleague. "I'm not sure what's going on with Ethan. He's been acting weird. Something's off." Mia responded almost immediately. "You've known him for years, Liam. What makes you think he's hiding something?" Liam typed a quick reply, his hands trembling slightly. "It's everything. The way he's been acting around me, the people he's meeting, the deals he's been talking about. I don't know, Mia. I think he's planning something I don't know about." Mia's response was swift again. "If you think something's up, you need to confront him. Don't let this eat you alive." Liam read the message but hesitated. Confronting Ethan would be risky. The man had been his closest friend for years. Was he really ready to face the possibility that Ethan might be betraying him? The uncertainty gnawed at him. Every fiber of his being told him to act, but part of him feared what he might uncover. If Ethan was truly involved in something nefarious, if he really had been hiding things from Liam all this time, what did that say about their friendship? Could it ever go back to what it was? Could Liam ever trust Ethan again? His thoughts were interrupted when the door to the store opened and Ethan walked in again. This time, his eyes met Liam's, and for a brief moment, Liam saw a flicker of something. Guilt? Fear? Or was it just Liam's mind playing tricks on him? Ethan quickly glanced away, his gaze falling to the counter as he approached the register. Liam's heart skipped a beat. Was this the moment? Would Ethan give something away now? Liam forced a smile, trying to mask the anxiety that had built up inside him. "Hey, Ethan. Back again?" Ethan gave him a quick, almost robotic smile. "Yeah, just a few more things to grab." He placed a few items on the counter, but his hands were shaking ever so slightly. Was it the pressure of being in public, or was there more to it? Liam couldn't shake the feeling that his suspicion was justified. As Ethan paid and left without saying much more, Liam's pulse quickened. He could feel the weight of the conversation still hanging in the air, but the questions only grew. What did Ethan know that Liam didn't? And how far was he willing to go to protect his friend, or expose him for what he might have become? Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something far darker was unfolding right under his nose. It wasn't just the odd behavior he had noticed in Ethan. It was the overwhelming sense that everything about their friendship, everything about the trust they'd built, was starting to crumble in ways Liam couldn't fully comprehend yet. The next few days were a blur of suspicion and confusion. Each time Ethan entered the store, Liam's heart would race, his eyes tracking every movement, every word, but Ethan's visits became less frequent. And whenever he did come in, he was always with that same man, a man Liam had never seen before. One evening, as Liam was finishing his shift, he caught sight of Ethan again, but this time the scene was different. Ethan and the man were standing by the back entrance, speaking in hushed tones. Liam could only catch snippets of their conversation, but what he did hear made his stomach tighten with dread. "We'll be perfect for the deal. No one will see it coming," Ethan said, his voice low, but just loud enough for Liam to hear. Liam's pulse quickened. A deal? What was Ethan involved in? And why did it sound like he was talking about something that would catch Liam off guard? He stepped closer, trying to keep his distance, yet unable to tear his eyes away from them. The man with Ethan, tall and confident, was nodding in agreement. They exchanged something. An envelope? A document? Liam couldn't tell. But whatever it wasn't good. Liam's mind raced. What deal were they talking about? Was it something business-related, or was it something more personal? His thoughts spun in circles, but one thing was clear. Ethan was playing a part in something that involved betrayal. The thought was almost unbearable. Could Ethan really be plotting against him? But why? What did he stand to gain from all this? The more Liam thought about it, the more the pieces started to fall into place. Ethan's recent behavior, his secretive meetings, and now this mysterious man. It all pointed to something bigger, something Liam hadn't yet fully realized. Suddenly, Ethan looked over his shoulder and caught sight of Liam. For a split second, their eyes met. Liam quickly ducked behind a stack of boxes, his heart pounding in his chest. He held his breath, praying Ethan hadn't seen him. But the feeling in the pit of his stomach told him otherwise. When Liam looked back, Ethan was gone, the man with him nowhere to be seen. The store felt eerily quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights suddenly deafening in the silence that followed. Liam's mind was racing. He had to know what was going on. He needed to understand what Ethan was involved in, but how could he get to the truth without tipping him off? The next morning, Liam couldn't focus on anything other than the conversation he'd overheard. His mind kept returning to that mysterious deal. What was it? What did it involve? And why hadn't Ethan told him about it? Why had he kept it hidden? Liam sat at his desk, staring at his phone, knowing he couldn't do this alone. He needed someone who could help him dig deeper, someone who wasn't directly involved. He picked up the phone and dialed Mia's number. It rang twice before she answered. "Liam?" Mia's voice was calm but concerned. "What's going on?" "I saw something last night," Liam started, his voice low, filled with frustration. "Ethan's been meeting with someone, a man, and it's more than just casual meetings. They're talking about deals, things that feel wrong. I don't know what's going on, but I need to know." Mia paused for a moment. "What kind of deal? What's he involved in?" "I don't know yet," Liam admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But it feels like more than business. It feels like betrayal. Liam, you need to be careful. If he's hiding something, you need to find out what it is. But don't rush into anything. You don't know what you're dealing with." Liam stared out the window, his thoughts clouded with doubt and fear. He had never felt so uncertain about a person he had known for so long. "I need to confront him, Mia," Liam said, his voice steady but tinged with doubt. "But I can't do this without knowing everything. I can't let him destroy everything we built together." Mia's voice softened. "Then we'll figure it out. But be careful. You're treading on dangerous ground." As Liam ended the call, he felt both a sense of resolve and a deep unease. The pieces were starting to come together, but the more he uncovered, the more he realized just how dangerous this game could be. Liam's mind was a storm of doubt and confusion. Every new discovery he made only seemed to pile on more questions. He was no closer to understanding what Ethan was really involved in, and with each passing day, the unease grew. He spent hours replaying the conversation he overheard, the secrecy of Ethan's dealings with that man, the way they exchanged something, an envelope, a document. There were still too many pieces missing. Was Ethan really working against him, or was he simply caught in something bigger, something beyond his control? The more Liam thought about it, the more the situation seemed surreal. This was his best friend, the man who had stood by him through thick and thin. Ethan had been with him since the beginning, long before the wealth, the success, the power. They had been brothers, bound by their shared history and trust. And now it seemed that everything they had built together was slipping through his fingers. Liam was at a crossroads. The evidence, while compelling, wasn't enough to confront Ethan directly. Not yet. He needed more. He needed to understand what Ethan was truly involved in, what he was hiding. He sat at his desk, the late afternoon sun casting a dim light across the room. His phone sat in front of him, the number for Mia's office already dialed. He had been avoiding calling her for the past few hours. What could he say? That he had suspicions, but no solid proof. She would never tell him to confront Ethan without knowing everything, without being absolutely sure of what he was dealing with. But Liam couldn't wait any longer. He hit the call button, holding the phone to his ear as it rang. His heartbeat thudded in his chest and the weight of the decision pressed down on him. Mia answered on the third ring. "Liam?" Her voice was steady, but he could hear the concern in it. "What's going on? You've been quiet for hours." Liam leaned back in his chair, trying to steady his breath. "Mia, I don't know what to do. The more I find out, the more I realize I might be too late. Ethan's involved in something bigger than I thought. But I don't have enough to go on. If I confront him now, I could lose everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Liam could feel Mia's silent judgment weighing his words, searching for a way to guide him through this. "Liam," Mia finally said, her voice softer, "I know you trust Ethan, but trust yourself more. You've seen the signs. You've overheard the conversations. You don't need to have all the answers right now, but you need to start confronting the truth." Liam closed his eyes, the weight of her words sinking in. Mia was right. He had seen enough. He couldn't keep living in the uncertainty, caught between loyalty and suspicion. If he didn't act now, he might lose everything, not just his business, but his sense of self. But there was still the question of Ethan. Could he truly confront his best friend, knowing that whatever came next would change their relationship forever? Was it possible to rebuild trust after this, if what he suspected turned out to be true? His thoughts were interrupted when the door to his office opened. He looked up to see Ethan standing in the doorway, a hesitant look on his face. It was rare for Ethan to visit him at work without reason. Something was off. Liam's heart skipped a beat, his stomach knotting with unease. "Hey, Liam," Ethan said, his voice uncertain. "Can we talk?" Liam's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment he had been dreading, the moment he had feared, but still, he wasn't sure he was ready to hear what Ethan had to say. Would he be truthful, or would he lie, just like he had before? "Yeah," Liam replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside him. "We need to talk." Ethan stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. There was a tense silence between them as he took a seat across from Liam. The air felt heavy, charged with the weight of everything unspoken. Liam leaned forward, locking eyes with his best friend. "What's going on, Ethan?" he asked quietly, his voice laced with a mixture of concern and accusation. "What are you involved in?" For a moment, Ethan hesitated, his gaze flickering to the floor before meeting Liam's eyes. There was a momentary flash of something, guilt, fear, but then it was gone, replaced by the cool, calculating expression Liam had seen all too often in the past few weeks. I've been dealing with some things," Ethan said slowly. "Things I couldn't tell you about. I didn't want to hurt you." Liam's heart raced, but he held himself back. What things, Ethan? He needed to know, needed to hear the truth, no matter how hard it might be to accept. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, but I made some choices. I'm in too deep now. I just didn't want to lose you over this." Liam's chest tightened. Lose me? The betrayal was more than he could comprehend. But he held his composure, unwilling to let Ethan off the hook just yet. "You should have trusted me, Ethan," Liam said, his voice low. "I could have helped. We could have figured it out together." The room fell silent again, the weight of their words hanging heavy in the air. Liam knew the truth was closer than ever, but it still felt out of reach. Liam sat at his desk, his eyes fixed on the folder in front of him. It was a contract, one he had stumbled upon quite by accident, buried among some old business documents. He had hoped to find answers in the quiet hours of the night, but what he uncovered now felt like the final confirmation of his worst fears. The contract was dated 3 months ago, signed by Ethan and a name he didn't recognize, Marcus Hawthorne. The more Liam read, the tighter his chest became. It wasn't just a simple business agreement. It was an explicit arrangement to funnel proprietary information from Liam's company to a rival. Ethan had been feeding insider knowledge to Hawthorne, one of the very competitors who had been trying to take down Liam's business. Liam's fingers trembled as he flipped through the pages, his heart pounding in his ears. The deal outlined in detail everything Ethan had agreed to: confidential data, business strategies, even customer lists, things that could destroy everything Liam had worked for. The sheer scale of the betrayal left him speechless. Ethan had sold him out for a fraction of what his company was worth. The realization hit him harder than any blow he'd ever taken. Not only had Ethan betrayed him professionally, but personally too. Their friendship, built over decades, was now nothing more than a lie. Ethan had known exactly what he was doing when he signed that contract, and Liam had been blind to it all. As Liam processed the enormity of what he had just uncovered, a dark thought crept into his mind. Had Ethan been planning this from the beginning? Was their entire friendship just a means to an end? A way for Ethan to get closer to Liam's success? Was all the trust, all the loyalty, just a well-played act? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Liam froze, his pulse quickening. The last thing he wanted was to face Ethan right now, not when he knew the truth. But there was no way out. "Liam," Ethan's voice came through the door, hesitant and quiet. "We need to talk." Liam sat back in his chair, his eyes never leaving the contract in front of him. He knew what was coming, but he couldn't prepare himself for the confrontation that was about to unfold. How could he confront Ethan when everything he thought he knew about their relationship was a lie? Without answering, Liam stood and walked to the door, swinging it open to find Ethan standing there, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something Liam hadn't seen in a long time: nervousness. The usual confident Ethan seemed to be gone, replaced by a man who looked as though he knew his world was crumbling. "What do you want, Ethan?" Liam's voice was cold, more distant than he intended, but the betrayal was too fresh, too raw. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "We need to talk. It's about everything." Liam didn't wait for him to continue. He held up the contract, the papers crisp and stark in the silence between them. "What's this, Ethan?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with an anger he couldn't suppress. "Care to explain?" Ethan's eyes flickered to the contract, and for a moment he seemed to shrink back. "Liam, I didn't want you to find that." "No, you didn't," Liam said, his words sharp. "Because it proves everything I've suspected. All those late-night meetings, the secrecy, the lies. This isn't just business, Ethan. This is betrayal." Ethan's face paled as he ran a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think, okay? I never meant for it to go this far. Don't lie to me," Liam cut him off, the betrayal burning in his chest. "You've been feeding my competitors information for months. How long were you planning on hiding this from me? How long were you going to let me think we were still friends?" Ethan's silence was deafening. Liam's eyes never left him, demanding answers, demanding truth. Finally, Ethan sighed, his shoulders sagging in defeat. "I was trying to protect us," Ethan muttered, his voice small. "The business, everything. I thought maybe if I could just get ahead, we wouldn't have to struggle anymore." Liam's mind reeled. "Protect them? Protect us? You destroyed everything we built, Ethan. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed the trust of everyone who ever believed in you." Ethan's eyes glistened, but he didn't speak. He was trying to find the right words, but none came. Liam stood there, the weight of the contract in his hand, his fingers trembling as he gripped the pages tightly. "This is over," he said, the finality in his voice cutting through the tension between them. "I don't know who you are anymore, but you're not the man I called my best friend." As Liam turned away, the door clicked shut behind him, leaving Ethan standing there, alone in the quiet. The distance between them had grown, and no matter how much either of them wanted to deny it, Things would never be the same. The silence in the room felt suffocating as Liam held the contract in his hand. Ethan stood across from him, unable to meet his gaze. The weight of the moment hung between them, thick with the truth that neither could deny, though Ethan seemed desperate to. Liam's fingers gripped the edges of the contract tighter, the pages crinkling under the pressure. His chest was tight, and his thoughts were spinning. Everything he thought he knew about their friendship was being unraveled in real time. This wasn't just betrayal in business, it was betrayal of the deepest kind. "I want to hear you say it," Liam said, his voice rough, the anger barely held in check. "I want to hear you say that you've been selling me out, that everything we've been through together, everything I've trusted you with, was just a game to you." Ethan's face was pale, his eyes darting from the floor to Liam but never staying too long on his face. The guilt was there, but so was something else, a defensive, almost combative look that Liam hadn't seen before. It was as though he was preparing to protect himself, to justify his actions. Liam, you don't understand," Ethan started, his voice shaking. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't want it to go this far. You have to believe me." "Believe you?" Liam's voice was laced with disbelief. "You've been feeding my competitors information behind my back, Ethan. That's not something I just believe away. That's not something I forgive without understanding why." Ethan's hands clenched into fists and his eyes hardened slightly. "I wasn't trying to hurt you, okay? I was just trying to protect us." Liam's eyes narrowed, his voice becoming colder with every word. "Protect us? By selling me out? By destroying everything I built?" "It's not what you think, all right?" Ethan's words tumbled out in a rush, desperate and defensive. "I didn't want to do it. I swear I didn't, but you..." He paused as if gathering himself. "You've been so focused on your business, on your empire, that I couldn't get your attention. I didn't know how to get you to see that we were struggling, that I was struggling." Liam's heart clenched, not with sympathy, but with frustration. Struggling? So this was about money? This was about your own damn ego? The words tasted bitter in his mouth. "You've known me for years, Ethan. I would have helped. I would have found a way. But you..." Ethan cut him off. "I didn't think you'd understand. I didn't think you'd ever get it. You were always the one in control, the one with all the answers, and I couldn't stand being left behind." Liam was taken aback by Ethan's words, a wave of disbelief washing over him. Was this really the excuse he was giving? Was Ethan so consumed with his own feelings of inadequacy that he had decided to throw their entire friendship away? Liam could feel the anger simmering just beneath the surface, but there was something else there too, a deep, gnawing sense of loss. He had trusted Ethan. They had been through everything together. Long nights building their careers, celebrating their successes, picking each other up when things fell apart. Now all of that felt like a lie. Ethan's eyes were now on Liam, his expression softer, almost pleading. "You don't get it, Liam. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you, but I was alone in this. I didn't have anyone else to turn to. I thought maybe if I just did this, I could finally prove that I was worth something, worth being seen." Liam's voice was quiet now, raw with emotion. "And you thought betraying me was how you proved that?" Ethan looked away, guilt flooding his face. "I didn't know what else to do. I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't think it would hurt you so much." Liam let out a slow breath, his fingers still gripping the contract as if it were the only thing anchoring him to the reality of the moment. "You were my best friend, Ethan," Liam said, his voice breaking slightly. "And this is what you've done. You've turned everything we had into a business transaction, a deal, and I don't even know who you are anymore." For a long moment, Ethan didn't speak. He just stood there, his face a mask of regret and helplessness, unwilling to face the truth of what he had done. Liam stepped back, shaking his head slowly as the finality of everything sank in. There was no going back now. There was no fixing this. Whatever had existed between them before, whatever trust had held them together, was gone. "You should leave," Liam said, his voice a whisper of what it had been. "Just leave, and don't come back until you've figured out who you are without me." Ethan didn't say a word. He just turned and walked out of the room, leaving Liam standing there staring at the empty space where his best friend used to be. The weight of betrayal hung heavily in the air, suffocating him as the silence settled around him like a blanket. Liam sat alone in his office, the contract from Ethan's betrayal lying before him. The dim light from the desk lamp did little to illuminate the darkness that had settled over him. The weight of the truth pressed on him, crushing every ounce of hope he had left. The past few days had been a blur, his heart torn between disbelief and anger. He couldn't understand how Ethan, his best friend, could have done something so calculated, so heartless. Ethan's words, "I was trying to protect us," kept echoing in Liam's mind, but they offered no comfort. Instead, they deepened the betrayal. How could Ethan have thought that this was the way to protect them, by tearing apart everything they had built? The phone on his desk rang, breaking the silence. It was Mia. Liam hesitated before picking it up. "Hello?" "You need to confront him, Liam." Mia's voice was firm, but there was an undertone of concern. "This isn't something you can walk away from. You need answers." "I already confronted him, Mia," Liam muttered, rubbing his eyes. "I got the truth, or at least I thought I did, but it's still not enough. Ethan's gone too far. I don't even know who he is anymore." Mia's voice softened. "I know this is hard, but you have to face it head on. You're not going to get peace until you hear the whole story from him. There's more, Liam. I can feel it." Liam clenched his jaw. "What do you mean? What else could there be? He already sold me out to a rival." There was a long pause before Mia spoke again. "What if this is bigger than you think? What if Ethan's been working with someone else? Someone even more dangerous than the rival you know about?" Liam froze. "What are you talking about?" "I don't know the details, but there's something off about all this. Ethan's involvement might not just be about business. You need to dig deeper." Mia's words stung. The idea that Ethan could be involved with someone else, someone more dangerous, was almost too much to bear. But she was right. Ethan's betrayal didn't make sense. There had to be more to it. "I'll find out the truth," Liam said, his voice hardening. "I need to end this." He ended the call, feeling more determined than ever. He wouldn't rest until he knew everything, but deep down, a gnawing fear started to take root. The idea of confronting Ethan again, knowing how much was at stake, made Liam's stomach churn. Ethan's betrayal wasn't just a matter of broken trust. It was an all-out war on everything Liam held dear: his business, his relationships, his entire life. Later that evening, Liam found himself standing outside Ethan's apartment. His heart was pounding in his chest, a mixture of anger, confusion, and fear. He had to do this. There was no other choice. Ethan answered the door after a moment, his face pale, his expression guarded. "Liam, you shouldn't be here. Don't make this harder than it already is, Ethan." Liam's voice was a low growl. "I need you to tell me everything. No more lies, no more games." Ethan stepped back, allowing Liam to enter. The apartment was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that felt suffocating. Ethan stood near the window, avoiding Liam's gaze. "What's going on, Ethan?" Liam's words were sharp, almost a demand. "What are you really involved in?" Ethan turned slowly, his face pale. "Liam, I didn't want you to get involved in this. I didn't want it to escalate like this. You have to understand, everything I did to protect you." "Protect me?" Liam echoed, his voice thick with disbelief. "You've done nothing but sell me out to anyone who would listen. What the hell is going on?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I was trying to get out from under everything you don't see. You're so caught up in the business that you never realized what was happening. I didn't know where else to turn." Liam took a step closer, his chest tight with fury. "You're telling me that you betrayed me because you were struggling? Because you couldn't handle the pressure? What about all the years we spent together? What about the trust we had?" "I never wanted it to go this far," Ethan snapped, his voice breaking. "I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to fix it without doing something drastic." Liam's breath caught in his throat. "And what about the man you've been meeting with? Who is he? Who else are you working with, Ethan?" Ethan's eyes flickered, a flash of fear crossing his face before he quickly masked it. I can't tell you everything, Liam. It's too dangerous." Liam's mind reeled. There it was again. The wall Ethan was putting up. He was hiding something bigger than just business. The tension in the room was unbearable. the uncertainty more terrifying than the truth itself. "You have to tell me, Ethan," Liam said, his voice low and commanding. "If this goes any further, I'll lose everything. My career, my family, my life." Ethan looked at him, his expression conflicted, torn between the truth and the lies that had held him captive for so long. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. "But there's no going back now. It's too late." Liam's world was crashing down around him piece by piece, and there was nothing left to hold on to. Ethan had crossed the line, and there was no turning back from this ultimate betrayal. The friendship that had once meant everything was shattered, and Liam had no idea how much further this betrayal would go. Liam walked back to his apartment, each step heavier than the last. The weight of everything he had just learned, everything he had just confronted, pressed on him like a physical burden. He hadn't expected Ethan to admit it so quickly, but the confession had only left him with more questions, more confusion. Was it really betrayal if Ethan felt justified? Did it matter that Ethan had tried to protect him in his own twisted way? Could Liam ever come to terms with the fact that someone he had trusted, someone he had loved like a brother, had been lying to him for so long? He opened the door to his apartment, the silence greeting him like an old friend. Everything inside felt cold, empty. The space he had once shared with his closest friend was now filled with the hollow echoes of their broken bond. Liam closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, but the tightness in his chest wouldn't go away. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. His mind was a whirlwind of anger, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. The tears came, unexpected and violent, ripping through him as he fell to his knees. For years, Ethan had been his anchor. They had shared dreams, fears, and victories. Together they had built this life, this empire, and now it was all falling apart. Was anything they had shared real? Or was it just a game to Ethan, a way to climb higher by tearing Liam down from the inside? Liam's hand found its way to his phone. He stared at the screen, his finger hovering over Ethan's contact, but he couldn't bring himself to call. What was there left to say? What more could Ethan possibly offer to explain this? The phone slipped from his hand and fell to the floor with a soft thud. He didn't care. Nothing mattered anymore. The man he trusted more than anyone had become a stranger, a betrayer. He staggered to the kitchen, his mind a blur, and poured himself a glass of water. He had to stay grounded. He had to make sense of this. But the more he thought about it, the less he understood. How could Ethan have justified this to himself? What was the point of all the lies, all the secret meetings, all the damage done? Liam ran his hands through his hair, his fingers trembling. His thoughts were a spiral, spinning faster and faster until he felt like he was choking. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. His body seemed to betray him in the same way Ethan had. The exhaustion, the heartbreak. It was too much to carry alone. Sitting at the table, Liam put his head in his hands, his breath coming in short, desperate gasps. He thought about everything they had been through, their shared history. But now that history seemed like a distant memory, fading into nothingness, the image of Ethan, the friend he had known, seemed impossible to reconcile with the man he had just confronted. The tears came again, quieter this time, but still relentless. His heart felt like it was being ripped from his chest, torn apart by the very person who had always been there, the one person he had trusted completely. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ethan. It was Mia. Liam wiped his eyes and picked up the phone, struggling to compose himself. "Liam," Mia's voice was soft but firm. "I've been trying to reach you. How are you doing?" He didn't answer right away. He couldn't. His throat was tight. His words stuck. Mia sensed the silence, and her voice grew more urgent. "Liam, talk to me. I know this is hard, but you can't keep bottling this up. You need to face it. You need to stop running from it." Liam squeezed his eyes shut. "I don't know how, Mia. I don't know how to face this. He was my best friend, and now I don't know who he is anymore. I don't know who I am anymore." Mia's voice softened, understanding the weight in his words. "I know it's painful, but this isn't the end of you, Liam. It's just the beginning of something else. You have to decide what you're going to do with this. You have to decide what comes next." Liam sat in the silence, listening to Mia's steady words. Her voice was the only thing that anchored him now. She was right. This was the beginning of something else. But what that would look like, he couldn't yet know. The future felt too uncertain, too dark. "I don't know if I can trust anyone again," Liam whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight," Mia replied softly. "But take it one step at a time. For now, focus on taking care of yourself. You're not alone in this." Liam let her words wash over him. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to feel something other than anger and confusion. Grief, deep and profound. He wasn't sure what came next, but he knew this. He couldn't stay stuck in this moment forever. Liam hadn't slept in days. Every time he closed his eyes, the images of Ethan's betrayal flashed through his mind. Ethan's confession, the cold distance in his eyes, and the way he had justified everything as though it were a game, as if all the years they'd spent together meant nothing. The fallout was already beginning. His phone rang incessantly with calls from investors, partners, and friends, all asking questions he couldn't answer. Rumors had already begun to circulate, fueled by the information Ethan had so willingly shared. His empire, his life's work, was starting to crumble. Liam leaned back in his chair, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop, trying to make sense of everything. The damage was extensive. Confidential documents leaked, competitors gaining ground, people questioning his judgment. Ethan's betrayal had done more than just affect their friendship. It had threatened everything Liam had worked for. The legal department had already begun investigating, but Liam knew this was just the beginning. Even with everything happening so fast, he couldn't bring himself to reach out for help. The guilt, the anger, it was suffocating. He had trusted Ethan with everything, and now that trust had been shattered beyond repair. His mind wandered to the people who had once been loyal to him. How many of them had Ethan already turned against him? How many had been in on this betrayal from the start? Liam felt completely exposed, vulnerable in a way he had never experienced before. It wasn't just his business that was falling apart. It was his sense of identity, his whole life. He had built his entire existence around the trust of others, and now that was gone. His phone buzzed again, snapping him out of his thoughts. He picked it up, already knowing who it was, Mia. "Liam, I know it's hard, but you need to make a decision. You can't let this consume you." Mia's voice was gentle, but there was an urgency to it. "I don't know how to stop it, Mia," Liam muttered, his voice rough. "It's too much. Everything I've worked for, it's all falling apart." Mia was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, her tone was firmer. "You need to face this, Liam. You're not the first person to go through something like this, and you won't be the last. The key now is how you move forward. The way you handle this will define everything. If you let this tear you apart, you'll lose everything, not just your company. You'll lose yourself." Liam ran his fingers through his hair, his head spinning. "How do you do that? How do you just move on after all of this?" "You have to accept it. It's going to hurt, but you have to face the truth head on. Ethan was never the person you thought he was, and no matter how much it stings, you have to accept that." Liam closed his eyes, the weight of Mia's words settling heavily on him. He could feel his resolve starting to harden, the anger and grief giving way to something else, a burning desire to take control, to rise above this. He couldn't let Ethan win. He couldn't let his empire fall because of one person's treachery. "I'm not going to let this break me," Liam said, his voice steady now. "I'll fight. I'll fix this." "I know you will," Mia replied, her voice softer now. "But remember, you don't have to do it alone. You've got people who care about you. You're not in this by yourself." Liam ended the call and stood up, pacing the room. For the first time in days, he felt a flicker of hope, a spark of determination. The fight wasn't over. It couldn't be. There was too much at stake. He sat back at his desk and began drafting an email to his closest team members, outlining the steps they needed to take. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the fight to reclaim what was his. But even as he wrote, doubts crept in. Was this really the right move? Could he trust anyone now? How many others had been complicit in Ethan's betrayal? He didn't know, but he couldn't afford to waste time second-guessing himself. Liam pressed send, then sat back in his chair staring at the screen. The next steps would be critical. He needed to act quickly. Every minute counted. As the evening wore on, he made phone calls, met with his legal team, and started planning his next moves. The fallout from Ethan's betrayal wasn't going to be easy to navigate, but Liam was determined. He had lost trust in the people closest to him, but he wasn't going to let that defeat him. He would rebuild, and he would do it on his own terms. He wasn't just fighting for his company anymore. He was fighting for his dignity, his future, and this time, he would make sure no one could take that away from him. Liam hadn't expected the discovery to come so quickly, but there it was, staring him in the face. A name, a connection he had never considered before. Ethan's betrayal, as deep as it had been, was only the surface. The real mastermind, the one pulling the strings, was someone Liam had once trusted beyond measure. Lucas Warren, his former mentor and the man who had helped him build his business from the ground up. Liam sat in his office, the weight of this new revelation settling over him like a heavy fog. He had trusted Lucas for years. They had shared ideas, strategies, and successes. But as the pieces fell into place, it became clear. Lucas had been playing him the entire time. Ethan was just a pawn, a convenient tool in a much larger scheme. Liam had stumbled upon it while going through old emails and financial records. Lucas's name had come up repeatedly, and with each mention, Liam's gut twisted further. Lucas had been at the center of the illegal dealings, using Ethan to siphon information from Liam's company, feeding it directly to their competitors. The complexity of it was staggering. This wasn't just about Ethan's envy or greed. It was a well-orchestrated plan, one that had been in motion for far longer than Liam could have imagined. For a long moment, Liam just sat there, numb. The betrayal ran deeper than he had realized. Ethan had been a willing participant, but Lucas had orchestrated it all, manipulating everyone around him. Liam felt a surge of anger, a fire that burned through him, sharpening his focus. He couldn't let this go. He had to confront Lucas, expose the full scope of the betrayal. But how? How had he missed the signs? How had someone so close, someone who had helped him achieve everything, been the one to destroy it? Liam stood abruptly, pacing back and forth in his office. He had to act. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. The betrayal was no longer just about a lost friendship. It was about his livelihood, his future. Lucas had been using Liam's trust to line his own pockets, playing a dangerous game behind the scenes. As the anger simmered, a small, nagging voice in the back of his mind whispered doubt. Was he really ready to confront the man who had once been like a father to him? Lucas had been there for him at every turn, guiding him when he was still struggling to make a name for himself. The very thought of going against him, of tearing apart everything they had built together, made Liam's stomach churn. But then he remembered Ethan, the lies, the deceit, and the fact that Lucas was the true architect behind it all. He had no choice. Liam grabbed his phone, dialing the number that he knew would connect him to Lucas. His hand was steady, but his mind was racing with questions. Questions that he knew could never be answered until he confronted the man who had turned his world upside down. The phone rang, the seconds stretching out in a painful silence. When Lucas finally picked up, Liam's heart beat in his ears. "Liam," Lucas's voice came through, smooth and reassuring, like nothing had changed. "How are you holding up, son?" Liam's jaw tightened. "I know what you've been doing, Lucas." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, a flicker of hesitation. But Lucas quickly recovered, his voice still calm, almost too calm. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play games with me," Liam spat, his anger bubbling over. "I know everything about Ethan, the contract, the leaks. You were the one pulling the strings, weren't you? You used him to destroy everything I've worked for." The silence on the other end was deafening. For a moment, Liam thought Lucas might hang up, but then the older man's voice came through, quieter now. "Liam, you don't understand. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did this because I thought you were too blind to see the bigger picture. You were so consumed with your success that you couldn't see the world crumbling around you. The business was going under, and you couldn't see it." Liam's breath hitched, the betrayal twisting in his gut. "You're telling me that you thought I needed saving, that you would destroy me to save me. I did what I thought was best. Lucas's voice was cold now, emotionless. You were losing control and I couldn't sit back and watch you burn it all down. Ethan was a means to an end. He was a tool, nothing more. Liam was shaking with fury. So everything we built together was a lie? All those years, all that trust. You used me, Lucas. Lucas's tone softened, almost apologetic. Liam, you were never meant to find out. I thought you'd eventually understand, but I see now that I was wrong. You're too involved in your own vision to see the truth. Liam's mind spun, a storm of confusion and rage. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't the mentor he had known. This was a man who had used him, manipulated him for his own gain. You've destroyed everything, Liam said quietly, the weight of the truth settling over him. And now, I'm going to make sure you pay for it. Lucas's laughter came through the line, cold and distant. You can't stop it now, Liam. It's already too late. Liam hung up the phone with a snap, his hands trembling. He stared at the screen for a long time, the realization hitting him all at once. It wasn't just Ethan who had betrayed him. It was Lucas, his mentor, his guide, the one person he had trusted above all else. And now, everything was gone. Liam stood in the conference room, staring out of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view of the city felt distant now, as though he were looking at it from another world. The building that once symbolized his success, his empire, now felt like a hollow shell. The people he had trusted had betrayed him. Ethan had betrayed him. Lucas had betrayed him. And yet, here he was, ready to fight, to take back what was his. He had spent the last few days scrambling, meeting with his legal team, pushing back against the rival company, securing what few loyal partners still believed in him. But the stakes were higher than they had ever been. Lucas had played a masterful game, but Liam wasn't done yet. He wasn't going to let everything he had worked for slip away just because of one man's greed. He walked over to the table where his laptop sat open, a list of emails and contacts displayed. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but his mind raced with what to do next. How did he dismantle this? How could he expose Lucas for the mastermind he truly was? There was no more room for hesitation, no more time for questions. It was now or never. Liam exhaled slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He clicked the email he had prepared, outlining his plan of action. It was time to gather everything, to confront the system Lucas had built and expose it to the light. Every piece of evidence, every move he had made. This was the moment to show the world who Lucas truly was. The truth was his weapon now, and he would wield it with everything he had. He pressed send. As the email left his outbox, Liam's phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Mia. Are you sure about this? The consequences will be enormous. Liam didn't hesitate. He typed back quickly. I don't have a choice anymore. It's time to end this. A few moments later, Mia responded. I'm with you. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Liam smiled bitterly. She had been with him through the highs and lows, and now more than ever he needed her strength. He had no illusions about what this would cost him. But the only thing worse than losing everything was losing himself without putting up a fight. He walked toward the door, his resolve hardening with each step. The board meeting was in an hour, and Lucas would be there, thinking he had already won. The man who had been pulling the strings, watching from the shadows, was about to see just how much Liam had left to lose. The elevator ride to the boardroom was agonizingly slow. Liam's thoughts churned, but his emotions had solidified into something fierce, a quiet determination that he would never show weakness again. No more mistakes, no more trust without suspicion. As the doors opened, he stepped into the room. The board members were already gathered, their murmurs silenced as they saw him walk in. Lucas sat at the head of the table, a smug smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He looked as though he had already won. Liam's eyes locked on his. The silence stretched for a moment before he spoke. This ends today, Liam said, his voice steady, cutting through the tension in the room. I've exposed everything, the deals, the lies, the betrayal. You've been playing a dangerous game, Lucas, and now the truth is out. The smug expression on Lucas's face faltered, but he quickly recovered. Liam, you're making a mistake. You don't understand the bigger picture. I did this for your own good, for all of us. No, Liam snapped. You did it for yourself. You sold me out to line your own pockets to protect your position at my expense. Don't try to justify it. The truth is there, and I've already made sure the right people know. He turned to the board members. You all have a choice to make. You can stand with me or you can stand with him. But know this, if you choose to stay with Lucas, you're complicit in his crimes. I won't let him destroy everything I've worked for. The room was silent as the board members exchanged uneasy glances. Lucas's face was now red with frustration, but Liam stood firm. His heart was racing, but there was no turning back now. The walls were closing in on Lucas, and Liam wasn't about to let him escape. One of the board members finally spoke. Liam, we need to review the evidence, but if what you say is true, it is, Liam interrupted, cutting him off. It's all true. The board members murmured among themselves, but Liam's eyes never left Lucas. Finally, one by one, the board members began to stand, signaling their support for Liam. Lucas's face twisted with rage as the realization hit him. He had lost. He had been exposed. Liam felt the weight of the moment, but there was no satisfaction in it. The damage had already been done. Everything was in pieces, and the only thing left to do was rebuild. But at least he had control now. At least he had taken a stand. Lucas shot him a final glare, but Liam was already looking past him. There was still much work to do, but for the first time in a long while, Liam felt the flicker of hope. The fight wasn't over yet, but this was the beginning of the end for the man who had torn his life apart. The boardroom had cleared out hours ago, but Liam sat at the long, polished table, staring at the now empty chairs. The weight of everything that had just transpired pressed down on him, but there was a strange clarity in the silence. Lucas had been exposed. Ethan was gone. The business was saved, but it felt like nothing was quite the same. For days, Liam had been consumed by anger and betrayal. He'd fought back against the lies, exposed the conspiracy, and reclaimed his future. But now, as the dust settled, he was left alone with the pieces of his life. What was the point of victory if it came at the cost of everything he had believed in? What was the point of saving the empire if the relationships that built it had crumbled beyond repair? Liam's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. He looked up, his face hardening. He had hoped for some solitude to process it all, but instead, there stood Mia, her face soft with concern, her eyes searching his. I thought you might need someone to talk to, she said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. How are you holding up? Liam didn't answer immediately. He hadn't really thought about it, hadn't allowed himself to feel anything other than the need for action. The confrontation with Lucas, the emotional breakdown, the legal battles, it had all consumed him. He hadn't stopped long enough to consider how much had been lost, how much he still had to heal. I'm not sure, he said finally, his voice low. I've done everything I needed to do, but I don't feel like I've won. Not really. It doesn't feel like it's enough. Mia walked over and sat beside him, her presence steady and calm. You've been through so much. You've fought for your company, for the truth. But Liam, you can't keep carrying all of this alone. You're holding on to so much anger, and it's not helping you move forward. You've done everything you can to fix the damage Lucas caused. Now it's time to heal. Liam looked at her, the walls he'd built around himself beginning to crack. She was right. He had been holding on to everything, trying to fix it all. But some things couldn't be fixed by just fighting. He had to let go. I don't know how to forgive him, Liam admitted, his voice breaking. I don't know how to forgive Ethan either. What they did, it's unforgivable. And I don't even know where to start. How do you forgive something like that? Mia's voice softened, gentle but firm. Forgiveness isn't about them, Liam. It's about you, about letting go of the anger, the resentment. It's about freeing yourself from the weight they left you with. Liam clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. But how can I just let them off the hook after everything they did to me, to everything I've worked for? You don't have to let them off the hook, Mia said quietly, but you can choose to let go of the hold they still have over you. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about freeing yourself from the chains that keep you tied to the pain. Liam stared at the floor, the truth of her words settling in like a weight in his chest. He had been so focused on vengeance, so consumed by the need to expose the betrayal, that he hadn't realized how deeply it was eating away at him. The anger, the rage, it was suffocating him, keeping him stuck in a cycle that prevented him from moving forward. "I don't know if I can," Liam whispered, his voice raw with emotion. "I don't know how to forgive them." Mia reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "Forgiveness isn't a destination, Liam. It's a journey. You don't have to have all the answers now. Just take it one step at a time." Liam sat in silence, the weight of her words sinking in. Mia was right. He couldn't change what had happened. He couldn't undo the past, but he could choose how to move forward from here. He could choose to release the grip the anger had on him. "I don't know where to start," Liam said, his voice shaky. "But maybe I can start by letting go of the anger." Mia nodded, offering a small smile. "That's a good place to start." Liam sat back in his chair, a heavy breath leaving his chest as the first crack in his walls began to widen. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't about erasing the past or pretending it didn't hurt. It was about learning to live with it, to heal, and to forgive, not for them, but for himself. For the first time in days, Liam felt like he could breathe again. Liam stood by the window of his office, gazing out at the skyline that had once represented everything he had built. Now, the view felt different. The city seemed quieter, less imposing. It was as if, after all the chaos, he was seeing it with new eyes. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel as daunting. The past weeks had been a whirlwind, confrontations, betrayals, the relentless pursuit of justice. His company was on its way to recovery, but the emotional toll had been heavier than he expected. Ethan was gone, and Lucas had been exposed, but the scars they left behind were not so easily erased. Trust, once shattered, was not something easily rebuilt, but he was rebuilding. Not just his company, but himself. Mia had been by his side through it all, offering support when he needed it most. She had helped him see that he could move on, that forgiveness wasn't just for the ones who betrayed him. It was for him, for his own peace. She had been the anchor he needed in the storm. And now, as he looked at the empty space where Ethan's desk had once stood, he realized he was stronger than he had been before. But that didn't mean the road ahead would be easy. He picked up his phone and dialed the number he hadn't called in a while. It was Mia, of course. They had spoken daily since the confrontation with Lucas, but today felt different. Liam knew the decisions he had to make would shape the future of his business and his life. There was no turning back. "Mia," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I'm ready. It's time to move forward." Mia's voice was calm and encouraging on the other end. "I knew you'd get here. What's next?" "I've spent too long chasing after people who didn't deserve my energy," Liam said, a hint of determination in his tone. "Now it's time to focus on the people who do. I need to rebuild, but this time it'll be different. I'm not just going to focus on the business. I'm going to focus on the people who matter, the ones I trust. And I'm going to make sure I never let someone like Lucas in again." There was a pause, and then Mia spoke softly, her voice full of warmth. "I'm proud of you, Liam. You're not just building a company. You're building a life, and it's going to be a life that you can be proud of, with the people who truly care about you." Liam's chest tightened at her words. It had been a long time since he had allowed himself to think about anything other than the business. But now, as he thought about the future, it wasn't just the empire he had once dreamed of that mattered. It was the people who would stand by him when the world seemed to fall apart. He looked at the calendar on his desk, noting the meetings scheduled for the next few weeks. There was work to do, but for the first time it didn't seem impossible. He had a plan. He had a purpose. And he wasn't going to let the past dictate his future. He walked out of his office, ready to face the day. The future was still uncertain, but he knew that with each step he took, the path would become clearer. He had fought for his business, for his future, And now it was time to build something even more important, the life he deserved. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be his to walk. As Liam stood at the door, ready to face whatever came next, a small but confident smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. The fight was over, and now it was time for the journey to truly begin. Liam stood at the edge of the balcony, his eyes tracing the horizon as the first light of dawn spread across the city. The weight of the past few months still lingered, but it was starting to feel lighter, as though the burden was slowly lifting. The fight against betrayal, the struggle to rebuild, it all felt like it had led to this moment. A moment of clarity, a moment of change. He had faced the darkness of loss, but he had also walked through it and emerged stronger. The business was recovering, but the real victory he knew now was not just the restoration of his empire. It was the chance to start over, to create a new life, one rooted in the lessons he had learned and the people he trusted. The events of the past had forced him to confront his own vulnerabilities. For so long he had clung to his success, to the image of the perfect businessman. But now, as he looked out at the sprawling city, he realized that he had been missing something far more important, his own sense of self. It wasn't just about being the best anymore. It wasn't about impressing others or proving something to the world. It was about building something that mattered, something sustainable, something true. He had learned that the hard way, but the lessons were now part of who he was. Liam's phone buzzed on the table beside him, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Mia. "Liam, I wanted to check in. How are you feeling? Are you okay?" Her voice was warm, caring. He smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. "Yeah, I'm good. I've been thinking a lot, about everything." "Everything, huh? And what have you decided?" she asked. "I've decided to move forward," Liam said, his voice steady yet full of resolve. "I've been through the worst, but it's over now. I'm starting fresh. It's time to focus on what really matters. My family, my friends, the people who've been by my side." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when Mia spoke again, her voice was softer. "You're not alone, Liam. You never have been." Liam nodded, the words hitting him harder than he expected. He hadn't felt this supported in a long time. The journey had been exhausting, and it had changed him. But now he had the clarity to see beyond the rubble of his past mistakes. He had something more than just a business to fight for. He had his heart, his peace, and his future. "Thanks, Mia," he said quietly. "I needed to hear that." There was a brief silence before she responded, her voice filled with quiet pride. "You're stronger than you know, Liam, and I'm proud of you. Don't forget that." The conversation ended, but Liam remained by the window, the weight in his chest now replaced by a sense of purpose. His heart was light. For the first time, he felt like he was truly in control of his own story. The empire he had built would be different this time, built on trust, respect, and the lessons learned from the ashes of betrayal. He had come through the storm, and now he was ready for the calm. It was time to focus on what really mattered. Rebuilding relationships, creating something that would last, and most importantly, finding happiness again. This time, it wouldn't be about the power or the success. It would be about the people who walked with him, the ones who would help him shape the future. Liam took one last look at the city below, his heart steady and his mind clear. He was no longer the man he had been before. He was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace a future filled with possibility. What do you think of Liam's actions? Was his fight for justice the right move? Or was it all fueled by anger and betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what's your score for this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our latest stories. And make sure to check out more heartwarming tales by clicking here on the end screen.